It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the 5 films on November 16th, 2007. We've got Robert Zemeckis' latest motion capture picture, After the Polar Express. We also have the fantasy family adventure film with Dustin Hoffman, Natalie Portman, and Jason Bateman, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, and a slew of independent movies. We have a mix of films that were not as successful. Actually, most of them were not successful. We have a new film with Javier Bardem in it, a new film from the director of The Squid and the Whale, and we also have Richard Kelly's follow-up to Donnie Darko. But, of course, before we get to all those movies, we got to talk about the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf. But anyway, this is Beowulf, which is based off of the old epic English poem. It's a modern interpretation of the poem with certain changes to the aspects of the narrative. And Neil Gaiman and Roger Avary wrote the script for this, which is very fitting considering what both Neil Gaiman and Roger Avary are now up to. Roger Avary's still in prison, and Neil Gaiman has been accused of many sexual harassment claims. So, yeah. Time flies in 18 years, but you have a cast that includes Ray Winstone, Anthony Hopkins, Robin Wright, Brendan Gleeson, John Malkovich, Crispin Glover, Alison Lohman, and Angelina Jolie, who plays Grendel's mother. And I'll tell you this, the most memorable thing from this movie when it came out was Angelina Jolie in this movie, because, yeah, even though this is an animated movie, they did a pretty good job of making her hella naked without her actually being naked. I mean, they just basically covered the nips and the vagina, and yeah, she's pretty much naked, and she's got a tail in this movie. So for anyone who had those weird fantasies out there, there you go. There it is right there. But all joking aside, though, I actually do kind of like this movie. I think it actually is one of the more underrated Robert Zemeckis movies around this time. Because like I said before, this was when he was really going full in on the motion capture animation style with work with the Polar Express and Monster House, and then later A Christmas Carol. And then it kind of fell apart with Mars Needs Moms, and the ill-fated Yellow Submarine reboot that never got made by Disney. But this was actually a pretty good movie, and it still actually does hold up. It is actually a lot better than I think the trailers from back then kind of made you think it would be. Like, it felt like a film that would probably be a product of its time and then kind of just evaporate away, but it's actually gotten a lot better as time goes on. I'm actually kind of surprised this has not gotten a 4K release yet. If it has, it was probably one that barely came out and nobody really remembers it came out, but I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gotten a full wide 4K release. And this was one of those movies where they were really testing the idea of putting these big blockbuster movies in 3D. This is a film that's tailored specifically for an IMAX 3D experience. I mean, this was starting to begin the push of that as more of the digital 3D movies are going to come within the next couple of years, especially with Avatar coming up in about 2 years' time. But yeah, overall, I thought the film was pretty good. Ray Winstone plays a very good Beowulf. Angelina Jolie is very good in this movie, playing Grendel's mother. The voice acting over here is top-notch. You got Hopkins, Wright, Gleeson, Malkovich, Glover. I mean, a lot of really good names in this film. The animation still looks pretty impressive after all these years. I was really expecting this movie to be very dated over time, but far from it, man. It's actually gotten a lot better as time has gone on, honestly. At least in my opinion, it has. But, yeah, like I said, this was a film that was really kind of a little game changer before we eventually got the movies that would eventually show that there is a future for digital 3D movies, even with the little higher prices on the 3D glasses in general. But this is a really good movie. It's one I do recommend checking out. It's actually one of Robert Zemeckis' more underrated films as a whole. It's a film I actually do kind of enjoy a lot. I really do like this film. It actually has gotten better over time, so I do recommend checking out Beowulf. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, and that is, I completely forgot it for a second, Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. How can I forget a movie with a title like that? Then again, that title will probably be the most memorable thing you remember from this movie, because everything else, yeah, it's not that good. You have Natalie Portman, who's Molly Mahoney, and the manager of Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, the awesome toy store owned by Mr. Edward Megorium, played by Dustin Hoffman. Molly was a promising composer and piano player when she was a girl, and now she is a 23-year-old insecure woman who feels stuck in her job. Don't we all? But among the costumers of the Emporium is the lonely hat collector Eric Applebaum, who has only Molly and Mr. Megorium for friends. When the last pair of shoes that Mr. Megorium bought in Toscana is worn, as he hires the accountant, Henry Weston, played by Jason Bateman, to adjust the accounts of the Emporium. Furthermore, he claims that he is 243 years old and his time to go has come. He gives a block of wood called Congreve Cube to Molly and asks Henry to transform the Emporium to her name. Molly tries to convince Mr. Megorium to stay in his magical toy store instead of going. And you can pretty much see everything that's wrong with the movie in particular. It's a film that is trying so hard to be the next Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, even more so than the 2023 Wonka movie was. And I didn't like the 2023 Wonka movie. I still don't like that movie, but this is a film that is just trying way too hard to be like that. It's trying to be the next Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but it's more like the Troy McClure movie that he was doing in that episode of The Simpsons. What was it? The Contrabulous. Now I got to remember now. I should know this. The Contrabulous Fantraption of Professor Horatio Huffnagel. Will it be a hit? 20th Century Fox is betting it will. Which I'm probably thinking is the same thing they thought with Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Will the gamble pay off? 20th Century Fox is betting it will. Sad news is that it did not. It's a film that is so bad that even the director, Zach Helm, has since disowned the film, and he's gone on to become a prolific director on Breaking Bad. And, yeah, the film is just all over the place, right down to the cameos in this movie that have absolutely no purpose to be in this movie whatsoever. Like, there's one cameo in particular that still baffles me to this very day, and that's Kermit the Frog, who just shows up and is just there shopping, and he's got these kids watching him, and he's just like, "Oh, hi, hey there, it's just me shopping." That's it, and that's the last time we ever see him. I mean, it's a really pointless cameo. At least when Oscar the Grouch showed up in Nightmare Nightmare on Elm Street, that'd be a different movie altogether. At least when Oscar the Grouch and Darth Vader showed up in I keep doing it again, in Night at the Museum 2, there was at least a point. They were there for longer than 10 seconds. Unlike Kermit in this movie, it just felt like, why is he even in here? Like, what's the point? Like, are we trying to just make the notion that, hey, even big stars like Kermit the Frog show up in this film and show up at this place? But yeah, it's not a very good movie. It's a real misfire of an opportunity, and maybe they had an idea of, like I said, turning this into the next Willy Wonka, but the difference is between this and Willy Wonka is that Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory is a movie that was ahead of its time and still very much holds up over 50 years later. I mean, this is a movie that still is very entertaining, and yeah, this movie just feels like they were just trying so hard to create the next Willy Wonka, and it just failed on so many levels. It's a film that's not enjoyable. It's a really lackluster film. It's amazing that a movie about magic and wonder has none of that whatsoever. If you want a better movie that is trying to be Willy Wonka and succeeds, watch the movie If that just came out in the last year with John Krasinski. That's a much better movie. That was a much better attempt to try to create a new Willy Wonka for a new generation, and that's one of my favorite movies from last year. I recommend that one first before I even think about making you guys sit through something like Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium ever again, or even for the first time around. Just don't watch it, man. All these people involved in here have been involved with much better things in general. I mean, Zach Helm went on to direct Breaking Bad, Dustin Hoffman, Natalie Portman, Jason Bateman. There's so many other movies you could watch with them involved. Just don't bother with this movie, man. Avoid it like the plague. So with all that said, let's go ahead and move on to, we're getting into the indie films now. The films that were supposed to be Oscar contenders, and not so much. They did not even come close to the Oscars with most of these. But let's start with the first one here. Javier Bardem, following up last week with No Country for Old Men, stars in Love in the Time of Cholera. I don't know if I just have The Simpsons on my mind right now, but every time I hear that title, I always think of the Treehouse of Horror episode where they go into ethnic town, and there's people are singing in the town, and one of them goes like, "Cholera, I have cholera," and he starts coughing like, like that's what I think of whenever I hear the name cholera. But Love in the Time of Cholera tells the story of a love between Femina Daza, played by Giovanna Mezzogiorno, and her lover, Florentino Ariza, played by Javier Bardem, and her husband, Juvenal Urbino, played by Benjamin Bratt, which spans 50 years from 1880 to 1930. This is based off of a book, as you saw in the trailer there, by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and is directed by Mike Newell, the director of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And, I mean, it's not a bad-looking film per se, and it does have those moments where Javier Bardem and has some good chemistry with the girl in the movie, but at the same time, it is really pretentious. I mean, it is definitely a very pretentious movie in general, and yeah, there's not really a whole lot there to the romance that makes you want to stick around throughout the course of it. I mean, the chemistry between the actors is fine, but everything else, though, it's a very pretentious, bland, romantic movie. And yeah, there's nudity in it, but as I always say, if for a movie like this, there's a reason why the internet exists, because you can go find that stuff easily and not have to waste your time with this movie, especially considering that's a film that's over 2.5 hours long. Okay, close to 2.5 hours, 139 minutes. It's close to 2.5 hours, but yeah, despite everything the movie has going for it, it's a film that is very much bland and pretentious, and the story is nothing that spectacular or amazing, and nothing really about it makes you want to stick around towards the end of it. Yeah, another letdown of a movie this weekend. Yeah, Love in the Time of Cholera, avoid it like the plague. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, Richard Kelly's follow-up to Donnie Darko, and that is Southland Tales. Sort of like this year's Ocean's 12, because it was pretty much a movie that was very much a film that nobody had any real idea of what the hell they were doing there, and I don't even think the movie was there either. But then again, Richard Kelly had just come off of Donnie Darko, and this is his first movie since then, and so everybody and probably the people who funded the movie said, "Hey, you made Donnie Darko, you made one of the great cult films of this decade. We'll give you a blank check. You can do whatever you want." And yeah. Movies like this are the reason why you don't give people blank checks to do whatever they want, because you get something on the not quite as chaotic as something like, say, Megalopolis with Francis Ford Coppola, but you get a movie that's not that great either. This is an international co-production of the U.S. and Germany, set in the then near future of 2008, and is a portrait of Los Angeles, as well as a satiric commentary on the military-industrial complex and the infotainment industry. And yeah, movies like this, you either hit it out of the park right away, or you just find yourself falling apart pretty quickly. And sadly, this one falls apart really quickly. Despite all the talent that's in this movie, Dwayne Johnson, Seann William Scott, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Mandy Moore, Justin Timberlake, Miranda Richardson, Bai Ling. I mean, there's a lot of good names in this movie. Wallace Shawn. Yeah, as many good names are in this movie, it's a very pretentious, bland mess of a movie. And yeah, I waited, I was one of those people that saw back in the day, and I didn't think much of it. I thought that was alright for what it was. But yeah, maybe it's a film that time needs to wait for this movie to show, like, maybe this was predicting the future. And yeah, this movie has not gotten better in 18 years since then. I mean, even back then, it was seen as a very polarizing movie. And even though it has a cult following, it's a Richard Kelly movie. Of course it's going to have a cult following. He made one of the great cult movies of all time with Donnie Darko, which also had a sequel that was not successful whatsoever. But then again, he wasn't really involved in it per se. But yeah, it's a boring film. Nothing about it works overall. And it's just a lousy film that it really has no idea of what it's trying to be. Does it want to be a straightforward comedy? Does it want to be a drama? Does it want to be a dark comedy on the levels of something like a Donnie Darko? It doesn't really know what exactly it wants to do, and it really does feel like it's all over the place. You can't really tell where it's going, and I thought, like I said, I thought maybe time would pass, and maybe I'd find the beauty of it later on down the road, but yeah, that is sadly not the case, unfortunately. So, yeah, another hard skip this time around on Southland Tales. So, with all that said, let us go ahead and move on to the last one that we have here, and that is Nicole Kidman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Jack Black in Margot at the Wedding. Or I guess Margot at the Wedding, whatever way you want to look at that. But why is the T there? Is it like with E? The E is silent, so I guess here the T is silent. But anyway, regardless, the film is about the familial storm that arises when Margot, played by Nicole Kidman, a writer, comes to visit her sister Pauline, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, on the eve of the latter's wedding. And this is directed by Noah Baumbach, who did The Squid and the Whale, of course, and coming off of a critically acclaimed film like that, as we've seen this week with several of the movies here, with Richard Kelly with Southland Tales, Mike Newell with Love in the Time of Cholera, and even Oh, I thought there was one more, but then again, Zach Helm didn't really do anything before that, or neither did Robert Zemeckis. But coming off of a critically acclaimed movie like The Squid and the Whale is a tough act to follow, and everyone is expecting you to follow that up. Like, what's your next big move going forward here? And yeah, with a movie like this, it's of the three indie films that we had this weekend, this one is the least bad. It's one that's at least trying. You can tell there is something there. You can buy into the characters overall, but the story is just something we've seen done to death so many times before in the past, and it doesn't really help the film in general when it's trying to be something unique and stand out on its own, especially be an Oscar contender around this time of the year. But unfortunately, it's just not here with this movie. And I like that Jack Black is doing something a little bit different outside of the comedy that he was doing at the time. This was something that was seeing him in a more dramatic role. I thought it was fine, and I think he's proven time and time again he could be a really good dramatic actor when he needs to be. I think Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Jason Leigh are fine, but other than that, though, there's just really nothing else there to really give this movie the spark that something like The Squid and the Whale had. And I feel like they really just half-assed it this time around, just made a safe bet movie, go for the Oscars, see if you can get something there, and unfortunately this film did not receive any Academy Award nominations as far as I know. No, it did not. The most I think it got was a Critics' Choice Award from the Chicago Film Critics and the Satellite Awards, and Independent Spirit Awards, and the Gotham Awards. But the Oscars, I think, were smart enough to stay away from this movie because, yeah, it's not very good overall. So, I mean, it's the best of the three indie films we talked about beforehand, but it's not really a great film either. A mixed opinion, but mostly leaning towards skip it. And so with all of that said, we wrap up this edition of Time About the Movies, and the next time we meet, we've got 6 movies to look at on this Thanksgiving weekend, with, of course, the biggest one being Amy Adams starring in the Disney Princess being taken from the animated world to the real world in Enchanted. One of this is easily this year's best Christmas movie, This Christmas, which features a Columbus Short, Neo, and Loretto Devine among the cast in here. Idris Elba is also in here as well. Timothy Olyphant starring as Agent 47 in Hitman. We also have Freddie Highmore and Robin Williams in August Rush. The Stephen King adaptation, The Mist, directed by Frank Darabont. And also I'm Not There with Cate Blanchett, Christian Bale, and Richard Gere, and a story about Bob Dylan. So we will take a look at all 6 of those movies coming up on tomorrow's show. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please go ahead and hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, notification button, and the bell, because you get updates on when new videos come out, and we do post new videos here every day. Now, with all that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.